The first notification didn't buzz. It pressed hard, like a thumb against my sternum. I was sitting alone in my truck, engine off, parked at the edge of the motor pool at Fort Cavazos. Dawn was just starting to leak into the sky, that dull gray blue that makes everything look unfinished. I was still in uniform, boots dusty, sleeves creased sharp enough to cut. My right knee throbbed with its usual reminder, damage from a bad landing during a night movement outside Mosul that never healed clean. My hands smelled faintly of CLP, starch, and old fatigue. My rank is Staff Sergeant, and I am Daniel Mercer, the soldier of U.S. Army. Infantry by MOS, convoy security by reality. 12 years in, and I'd learned to recognize the difference between noise and impact. The phone lit up in the cup holder. "Dad, we need to talk. Call me." I didn't move. Around me, the base was waking up, formations forming, boots hitting concrete, engines turning over. The sound of order. Inside the cab, it was silent enough to hear my own breathing fog the windshield. The second message came before I touched the phone. "Dad, it's about the money. Karen has questions." That was the moment something inside me went still. Not angry, not shocked, just settled. Karen, my stepmother, the woman who'd never once asked what unit I was in, but somehow felt comfortable asking what my bank balance looked like. The woman who called my deployments those long absences, and once asked if the Army reimbursed me for all that stress. I picked up the phone and called my father back. He answered on the second ring. "Son." "Before you say anything," I said, my voice level, controlled, the same tone I used on soldiers right before things got serious. "You need to listen." A pause, papers shifting. I could picture him at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold, Karen close enough to hear every word while pretending not to. "She's just asking," he said, "about the settlement, about whether that money should be—" "That's the word. One more." Silence stretched. Somewhere outside the truck, a bird struck the windshield lightly and fluttered away. "I'm going to be very clear," I said. "One more word from Karen about my money, and we're done pretending this is a conversation. I will deal with her myself, directly. I'll explain her boundaries and why my money is not hers to question, plan, borrow, or redistribute." "You don't have to be so aggressive," he said. "I'm not. I'm being precise." Another pause, longer this time. "What brought this on?" he asked. I leaned back into the seat and closed my eyes. 3 nights earlier, my phone had buzzed in my barracks room while I was cleaning my rifle for the 3rd time. Nothing left to clean, just keeping my hands busy. The email had been from Captain Reyes, subject line stripped of emotion. Award packet, immediate review. Inside was language only the military uses, clean, clinical, documenting decisions under pressure, naming actions without drama, attaching a number to consequences that don't fit neatly into words, a commendation, a compensation package, a line item civilians see as money, but the Army records as aftermath. I stared at the screen a long time before forwarding the email to my father, not bragging, just informing, trying one last time to bridge the gap. "What changed," I said, opening my eyes as the flag rose over headquarters in the distance, catching the first real light of morning, "is that I finally understood something." "And what's that?" he asked. "I don't owe explanations to people who only show up when there's something to take." He exhaled slowly. "I'll talk to her. Make sure you do, because next time I won't be polite." Then I ended the call. The flag snapped once in the wind before settling. I sat there a moment longer, hands steady, heart quiet, already knowing this wasn't the beginning of a fight. It was the end of waiting. People think the Army makes you loud. It doesn't. It makes you exact. You learn early, usually the hard way, that volume is wasted energy, that clarity keeps people alive, that emotions are something you acknowledge privately and store properly, like gear you'll need later. I'd been doing that for over a decade by the time Captain Reyes sent that email. I enlisted at 19, infantry, Because I didn't want ambiguity. Because I grew up in a house where everything was implied and nothing was said straight. My biological mother died when I was 14. Cancer. Fast. After that, my father married Karen within a year. She moved in like she'd always been there, reorganized the kitchen, reorganized our lives, and slowly, but very deliberately, reframed my past as something inconvenient. The Army didn't do that. The Army gave things names, rank, responsibility, consequences. By my second deployment, I was already the one younger guys watched when things went sideways. Not because I talked the most, because I didn't. Because when something broke, I fixed it without theater. When someone panicked, I slowed everything down until the noise disappeared. Convoy security teaches you patience in a way nothing else does. Hours of nothing, then seconds of everything. You learn to notice small changes, the way a road feels wrong, the way locals stop looking at you, the silence before pressure. You learn that survival isn't about heroics, it's about consistency, about doing the unglamorous things correctly every time, whether anyone notices or not. At home, no one noticed. When I came back from my first deployment, Karen hugged me like a coworker she didn't really like, quick, careful, as if I might stain her sweater with something invisible. At dinner, she asked if I was done with all that desert stuff now. When I explained rotations, she nodded politely and changed the subject to my cousin's new job in real estate. My father followed her lead. He always had. In the Army, your chain of command is explicit. You know who outranks you, you know who answers for what. At home, authority was implied, emotional, slippery. Karen never ordered me to do anything, she just made it uncomfortable not to comply. I learned to stop correcting her. When she told neighbors I worked overseas sometimes, I let it go. When she referred to my unit as the group you're with, I didn't bother explaining. When she asked after my second deployment whether I had thought about doing something safer now, I smiled and said I was where I needed to be. What I didn't say was that the Army was the only place I didn't feel like an inconvenience. The money came later. Not all at once, not dramatically. It started with a mission most people will never hear about, a recovery operation after another unit hit trouble. Night movement, poor weather, bad intel. The kind of situation where there's no clean win, only decisions that minimize damage. A vehicle went down in a compromised area. I rerouted the convoy, established a perimeter, coordinated air cover, and stayed exposed longer than doctrine recommends, because pulling back would have meant leaving 2 soldiers behind. One of them had a shattered ankle, the other froze when the firing started. We got them out. No speeches, no chest thumping, just a lot of paperwork afterward. The Army notices things civilians don't. Patterns, judgment under pressure, consistency over time. Captain Reyes called me into his office weeks later, no build-up, no congratulations. "You kept people alive," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "That matters." Inside was the start of an awards package. Commendation, medical follow-ups, compensation tied to documented injuries aggravated during the operation, my knee among them. Everything accounted for, everything signed, stamped, and archived. It felt strange, not like winning, more like closure. When I told my father, I kept it simple. "They're recognizing some stuff from my last rotation," I said over the phone. "There's an awards ceremony next month. It'll be broadcast on the base feed." "That's good," he replied. "Is it serious?" "It's official," I said. That was as close to pride as I got. Karen took the phone later. "That means a bonus, right?" she asked, casual, like she was asking about a holiday sale. "Something like that," I said. "Well," she laughed, "you've been gone long enough. It's nice it finally pays off." That was the first time I felt the gap clearly. Not the physical distance, not the deployments, the interpretation. To the Army, the money was documentation, evidence that certain lines had been crossed, certain costs incurred. To Karen, it was a return on investment, a delayed paycheck she felt entitled to evaluate. I didn't correct her. That was my mistake. From that point on, the questions started coming more often, not directly, never openly. "Your father mentioned you're doing well now." Must be nice having the government take care of you. We should really sit down and talk about long-term plans as a family. In the Army, when something becomes a pattern, you address it. You don't wait for it to become a problem. At home, I waited. I told myself it wasn't worth the conflict, that explaining would only make things worse, that silence was discipline. But silence, I learned, can also be permission. The night before the email from Captain Reyes, Karen asked my father, within my earshot, whether my savings were just sitting idle. That kind of money shouldn't go to waste, especially when family could use it. That was when I realized she wasn't curious, she was calculating, and I was done letting my restraint be misread as weakness. When the email arrived, when the number became real, when the Army finalized what it owed me for years of accumulated wear and consequence, I understood something else too. This wasn't about money, it was about ownership. The Army acknowledged what it took from me. My family only saw what they might get. That was the chasm. And once you see it clearly, you stop trying to build bridges across it. You step back, you secure your perimeter, and you decide, quietly, deliberately, who gets access going forward. The invite to the ceremony went out on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic, a PDF attachment, black text on a white background, time, location, uniform requirements, a line at the bottom noting that the event would be recorded and archived by the Department of Defense, permanent, searchable, unemotional. I forwarded it to my father that night with a single line. "If you want to watch, it'll be streamed." He replied the next morning, "Dad, we'll see." No question marks, no follow-ups. Karen didn't text at all. The week leading up to the ceremony moved the way the Army always does, steady, indifferent to personal context. PT at 0530, equipment layouts, briefings that mattered more than feelings. I pressed my uniform myself, slow, methodical, smoothing every crease until it looked exactly the way regulations demanded. Not for them, for me. At night, in the barracks, I caught myself checking my phone more than usual. Not hoping, just observing. The way you monitor a sector you already know is quiet. Nothing came. 2 days before the ceremony, my father called. "You know, your stepmother thinks these military things are kind of overblown?" I didn't respond right away. "She says it's mostly just politics, that everyone gets something these days." I stared at the wall across from my bunk. The paint was chipped near the floor where someone had once kicked it in frustration. "Is so?" I asked. "She just doesn't want you getting your hopes up," he said quickly. "You know how you are. You take things personally." That was the dismissal. Not loud, not cruel, just efficient. It took years of training to recognize it for what it was. "I'll be there," he added, "but Karen has an appointment, might not make it." "That's fine," I said, and I meant it. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bunk for a long time, boots still on, hands resting on my knees. There was no spike of anger, no urge to defend myself, just a quiet recalibration, like adjusting your sights when you realize the target isn't where you thought it was. I stopped explaining. On the day of the ceremony, I arrived early. Always did. The auditorium smelled like polished wood and old air conditioning. Flags stood rigid along the stage. Officers murmured to each other in low voices, flipping through programs they already knew by heart. When my name was called, I walked forward, posture straight, eyes level. Captain Reyes read the citation without embellishment. Dates, locations, actions taken, consequences mitigated. Applause followed. Polite. Measured. A medal was placed in my hand. It felt cold, heavier than it looked. Not like honor, like documentation. Somewhere in the crowd, phones were raised. The recording light blinked. Red. Unblinking. I didn't scan the audience. I already knew who wasn't there. The ceremony ended the way all official things do. Abruptly. People stood, talked, moved on. I returned to my unit space and changed out of my uniform alone.
folded it carefully, set the medal in its case, locked everything away. That night, my phone buzzed. Dad, watched part of it. Good job. 2 words, no punctuation. Karen didn't text.
The next morning, I ran PT harder than usual. Let the cold air burn my lungs. Let the rhythm reset me. When my knee flared, I adjusted pace instead of pushing through blindly. Discipline isn't about punishment, it's about sustainability. Later that afternoon, a buddy from another company stopped me outside the DFAC. "Hey," he said, pulling out his phone. "You didn't tell me your ceremony got posted?" "Posted where?" I asked. He turned the screen toward me. The base public affairs page, a still image from the recording, my name in the caption, rank, unit, citation summary, public, shareable, permanent. I nodded once. "Yeah." "Your family see it?" he asked. I shrugged. Not my lane. And for the first time, that wasn't a defense mechanism. It was a boundary. I didn't send the link. That part matters. The video made its way out on its own, the way official things always do once they're released into the system, shared by the base page, picked up by a unit spouse group, reposted by someone who recognized my last name and thought they were being supportive. I found out the same way my family did. My phone buzzed while I was in the gym, mid-set, hands chalked, breath controlled. I finished the rep before checking it. Discipline doesn't turn off just because your past is catching up. "Dad, why didn't you tell us it was this serious?" I stared at the message longer than I should have. A second one followed. "Dad, Karen feels really embarrassed. People are asking questions." That told me everything. Not pride, not concern, embarrassment. I sat on the bench, elbows on my knees, sweat dripping onto the concrete. Around me, weights clanged, conversations overlapped, life moved forward. I let it. I didn't respond right away. Later that evening, the texts came faster. "Dad, you could have explained better." "Dad, we didn't know it was going to be so public." "Dad, you made it look like we didn't care." Karen finally texted. "Karen, I wish you'd told us how important this was." I read that one twice. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again, deleted that too. Then I put the phone down. In the Army, when something is already documented, you don't argue about it. You reference the record and move on. The video existed. The citation existed. The archive existed. My explanations were no longer required. 2 days later, my father called. His voice was different, softer, careful. "People from church saw the video," he said. "They asked why we weren't there." I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window of my quarters. The flag outside moved slowly in the evening wind. I asked, "And?" he admitted. "I didn't know what to say." "That's okay. You told the truth." Silence. Karen got on the line without asking. "You know," she said, "if you just communicated more, we could have supported you." I waited until she finished. "I did communicate. You just weren't listening." "That's not fair," she snapped. "You always keep things to yourself. You act like we're outsiders." I kept my voice steady. "You are outsiders. To my finances, to my service, to my decisions." She inhaled sharply. "After everything we've done for you?" I pictured the kitchen she reorganized, the holidays she tolerated, the questions she asked only when numbers were involved. "This conversation is over," I said. My father tried to smooth it. "Son, let's not blow this out of proportion." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm setting it." There was no apology, no resolution, just an adjustment. Awkward, imperfect, real. Over the next few weeks, the messages slowed. The tone changed. Less entitlement, more caution. Karen stopped asking questions altogether. My father checked in occasionally, sticking to safe topics. It wasn't a reconciliation, it was a recognition, and that was enough. One evening, after a long day, I took the medal out of its case and set it on the desk. I didn't feel pride exactly. I felt alignment. the kind that comes when your internal standards match your external life. The Army didn't give me validation, it gave me clarity. Family, I realized, isn't who demands access, it's who respects your perimeter. I stopped waiting for them to understand, stopped hoping for a version of support they'd never offered. I slept better, moved lighter, spoke less, and when I thought about the money, the settlement, the compensation, I didn't see it as something to defend anymore. It was simply mine, earned, documented, closed. If you're listening to this and you felt that same quiet dismissal, your service minimized, your sacrifices reduced to numbers, know this: you don't owe anyone an explanation for a life they didn't live. Stand your ground. Set your boundaries. Let the record speak. Peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from knowing exactly where you stand and staying there.